Assalamu alaikum. Mr. Moderator, our distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, our friends and our enemies.
Bismillah wa salatu wa salam Rasulullah wa ba'd. Family, friends, foes, homies, and haters, welcome back to another episode of The Features. I come to you with peace, love, serenity, no hatred in my heart at all. And I greet you in peace. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and the blessings of Allah be upon all of you. So please don't forget to hit subscribe, don't forget to like, do not forget to share, and please don't forget to hit me up on Patreon. This new series I'm starting, it is going to be a real ride per se. This one series, has me really even doing it, because I said to myself, I won't get involved in this situation, but inshallah, it'll bring some clarity, hopefully, to a lot of issues of why it's so important to listen to the advice of our elders. So without further ado, let's get into it. White supremacy was basically birthed in the middle 1400s. And since that time, white supremacy has been the single most devastating belief system on earth since its inception. Nothing has killed and slaughtered more people than the concepts behind white supremacy up until this very day. So every few years or so, there's a rebranding of white supremacy. So what do you mean? Like, for example, the Civil War happened, and then after the Civil War, after what's known as the Reconstruction Period, where the KKK was actually born, there's something known as the Jim Crow era, where there was mass murder of black folk in the States in order to prevent them from voting and gathering power and whatnot, power positions, because during this time, after the Civil War, black people were in very influential, powerful positions in politics, building schools, building institutions, and all of that was razed to the ground during this period. Then during the 1920s, because it was getting more difficult for white supremacists to hide their violence and their racist attitudes, what happened was known as women's suffrage. This was a rebranding of white supremacy. This is the beginning of the feminist movement. And so what the feminist movement essentially did is that they were under the guise of saying that we women, we are oppressed. Now we want voting rights. But the whole goal of that was to rebrand this white supremacy so that the rights that were supposed to go to black people actually went to white women. And then during the civil rights movement, again, it was rebranded again. We've seen a major shift in politics in the States, where black people were historically Republican. But what happened was the whole demographics switched from black people leaning Republican to leaning Democrat, and that's why you see black people accepting the Democratic Party up until this day, and that was because of the Democrats' position on civil rights. But this again, this liberal type of positioning, the liberal movement and the LGBTQ movement were actually Trojan horse movements in order to prevent black rights. I'll do some detailed videos on that, inshallah, in the future, right? But all of this is true, right? Liberalism, feminism, LGBTQ, all of them are actually Trojan horse movements to divide and conquer, which is a very potent strategy of white supremacy. They always have these methods of dividing and conquering the people, right? And that's what these movements actually are. So now when Barack Obama came into power, instead of Barack Obama, again, as I mentioned in previous videos, he is just white supremacy and blackface. Instead of making any tangible gains for black people voted for him because of what they saw was a black person, not knowing that since the 60s, it has been U.S. political policy never to allow a black messiah to rise. So he's actually working for white supremacy. And what did he do? He was the one who bolstered the LGBTQ movement during his tenure. And then Donald Trump was running for president during the 2015-2016 period. And then we saw a major makeover for white supremacy again. And there've been these makeovers and rebranding of white supremacy so many times throughout history. But this makeover or rebranding of white supremacy is what we know today as the alt-right movement. All alt-right movement is in fact white supremacy. That's all it is, right? So when you see people pandering to the alt-right or to the far right of this political left-right spectrum, what they're trying to tell you is that we are pandering to white supremacists, but we can't say we're white supremacists because that is not palatable for the population. You understand? So the population themselves will not easily digest if we say we are white nationalists, white supremacists, because that has obviously a bad name due to the mass killing, rape, plundering, colonialism, imperialism, all this death and despair that white supremacy has caused worldwide. So they package it as something palatable for the people so that they can accept these political ideas, and they call it alt-right. So what does this have to do with anything? Well, Daniel Haqiqatjou is probably the first and only Dai I've ever seen who openly panders to the alt-right. So what we're going to do, this is not a refutation of Daniel Haqiqatjou. This is his actual words, his actual works, and we're going to have a look at them. So let's have a look at some of the things that he has written. So here we have one of his several articles where he talks about white nationalism, white supremacy, and alt-right politics. And as you can see here from the title, a Muslim response to white nationalism and white replacement. So you would think that he would be outright refuting white nationalism, but you're going to see in a second what he's doing here. So Daniel Haqiqatjou, he writes, a critique of white nationalism must be a critique of ethno-nationalism and ethnic identity more broadly. This is where leftist social justice warriors and cultural Marxists are handicapped. The identitarian left and its so-called celebration of diversity reduces all identities to gender, racial, cultural, and sexual identities. Each gender, race, culture, and sexual predilection has its own associated identity group whose collective interests our groups are entitled to pursue. In fact, those collective interests have to be furthered by social justice policies that counteract systematic injustice. But what about white men? Well, white men don't get to pursue their collective interests because they are primary source of the systematic injustice that is oppressing every other group, or so it is claimed. I certainly think that there is truth to this. How convenient for whites to have engaged in centuries of colonialism, genocide, conquest through mass death around the world, only to now conclude that they want to be left alone in their own nations, nations which, by the way, sit on land they forcefully acquired from indigenous populations. On the other hand, why should young white men today have to pay for the sins of their fathers? Is there a collective guilt they are uniquely burdened with by virtue of their blood? This kind of racial realism cuts both ways. If race is purely a social construction, which cultural Marxists and critical race theorists claim whenever it suits them, then why should millennial whites, many of whom are cultural Marxists themselves in one form or another, be held responsible for the crimes of their biological forefathers? So there's a few things to unpack here. Now, remember what I was saying about white supremacists rebranding themselves every so often. They always do this to hide behind their white supremacy. And there's a certain language and keywords that they always use that you can recognize them by. And essentially what Daniel Haqiqatjou did here is he's basically exposing his personal politics in this article. And that's why it comes off as an apologist piece for alt-right politics, because it is in fact an apologist piece for alt-right politics. And if you don't believe me, just go and read the article yourself. I'll leave it in the description, and then you tell me, all right, if this is a refutation on white nationalism or an apologist piece on white nationalism and white supremacy. Now on to another article that he wrote. So here in this piece, he writes, and the title again, why are so many far-right extremists converting to Islam? So let's see what he writes. So he says here, the far right is definitely sympathetic to Islamic values, as I have written before, which, yeah, he actually has, right? So much of the right wing consists of people who are sick and tired of, again, the leftist cultural project that pushes feminism, homosexuality, and cross-dressing on society and labels. Whoever does not embrace that filth with smiles and rainbow pins as fascist, people are tired of this garbage, okay? So we see here, again, it's that language. He's actually attacking leftists, and he's doing it very openly and blatantly. He's attacking leftist politics and favoring right-wing or far-right political values. And this piece right here is actually an open pandering piece towards white supremacy, even by the title itself. And you can, again, I'll leave the link, and then you can see it for yourself. Now, some of you are thinking right now, the quicker ones anyway, that this is not a pandering piece for white supremacy. This is a straight up apologist piece for far-right politics. And I would say, in the spirit of Husnul Dhan, because the purpose of this particular video is not to criticize the brother Daniel Haqiqatjou, it's just to show you his politics. And his politics are clearly alt-right politics. Clearly alt-right politics. And why is this important? It's important because Omar Suleiman's politics are far left-wing politics. You get me? So because Daniel Haqiqatjou is right-leaning in his political philosophy, this is why he's all up in Omar Suleiman's grill, because he's on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. Now, if you remember, in my 4-part series with Wajdi, right, the part 4, if you remember that video, I threw out some bait to draw these people out who are silencing and censoring and shutting down black voices. And they took it. And not only did they take it, they were all over my channel calling me all kinds of racist and stuff. But yet here comes Daniel Haqiqatjou making clear pandering articles towards white supremacy, and nothing, not a word. White supremacy, which has slaughtered more human beings in human history than any other philosophy ever. Up until this very day, every country on the planet, including Muslim countries, are suffering because of white supremacy. But he's not, according to their worldview, he is not racist. I'm the racist because I openly call to the dealing of black issues and the unity of black people and the unity of black people in white supremacist society. Openly. I'm the racist for doing that so that we can survive in white supremacist society. But Daniel Haqiqatjou, who is pandering to white supremacists, is not a racist. But anyways, if you ask me personally what I think of Daniel Haqiqatjou, this is my personal belief. My personal belief is that he's just the opposite end of the left-right spectrum with Omar Suleiman. There's really not much difference between both of them. Both of them, in my humble opinion, are what you call Trojan horse Dawah, okay? Meaning that they, on the outside, it's gift wrapped with Islam, but once you bring it into your house, you're getting something completely different, okay? One is calling to progressive liberalism, left-leaning, and the other one is very openly pandering to alt-right and white supremacy. So are you saying that Daniel Haqiqatjou is a white supremacist? No, I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is neither white supremacy nor racism is a deal breaker for him. That's what I'm saying. I will repeat, white supremacy nor racism is a deal breaker for brother Daniel Haqiqatjou. This is why I keep telling you guys the same things. Just leave the stuff alone. Leave it alone. Really, it's over most of your heads, especially if you are not from the West. You just won't understand these things. I'm sorry. Just leave it alone. Okay? Don't involve yourself in these polemics. Rather, you should be more suspect of the ones who are always in it. And me personally, I listen to both of them. You know what I'm saying? But the reason I'm able to do that is because I do not put myself in the box. I don't do that. Nor do I consider either what Omar Suleiman does or Daniel Haqiqatjou, what they do, Islamic knowledge anyways. I'm sorry, it's not Islamic knowledge. You know, Islamic knowledge is Quran and Sunnah. You know, this, what they're doing, one is refuting left politics, and the other one is left political. How is that knowledge? Anyways, Omar Suleiman is a good speaker, and Daniel Haqiqatjou is fighting LGBTQ, but it's you guys who make Islam like team sports. Then you blame the ulama when they don't join your team. And then you come to me and say, take a position. And when I look you dead in the eye and I say, make me, you sit there with shock on your face and say, like, what just happened? Okay? Because you thought You thought this was wala wa bara, and it's not. You thought this was loving and hating for the sake of Allah, and it's not. But the one who is causing all the fitna, ordering you to take these positions, those are the ones you really need to abandon. The ones who accuse our scholars and they use their platforms openly to lie, like Wajdi al-Akari, and make these relationships, based upon what they believe and what they don't believe. The ones who are causing the chaos, those are the ones you need to be worried about. It takes a special kind of stupid to believe the ones creating the chaos are the ones who are going to fix it. If you would just memorize Quran and shut up, all these problems will melt away like warm butter. You see, these people, okay, these representatives of the new wave of hypocrisy dawah, these rabid ruwaybada, you see, they have certain kind of patterns and behaviors and habits when it comes to addressing black people. You see, what you need to understand that this league of dawah dope dealers work on behalf of organizations and institutions that push their platforms on behalf of white supremacy. They are truly not about bringing any tangible change or reform in Western society. Their only dawah is about band-aid solutions to keep you as a functional Muslim in Western society, selling you courses and whatnot. Not to say that there's anything intrinsically wrong with a course. However, that's one of the main reasons that there's so much corruption in the dawah. It's because of money. It's because of money. They try to control black dawah because black people are the world's biggest cash cow. But that's, another video for another day. So when they address you directly, meaning you black people, they always talk about hadith of brotherhood, no racism in Islam, and they always mention Bilal ibn Rabah. Ain't that right, black family? But the second you start mentioning issues specific to the black community and addressing black suffering and black unity, they tend to be very vicious. And when you look out for your own self-interest, they call you all kinds of names. So when it comes to you and your issues, your specific issues, black family, they lose all diplomacy. They resort to slights and epithets like racist, lost, dal mudil, black supremacist, and so on. They reserve all diplomacy for white and Arab supremacy. I'll repeat that. They reserve all diplomacy for white and Arab supremacy. Their diplomacy is for specifically Eastern cultural groups, white supremacy, with the exception of maybe Western African scholarship. They really and truly do not respect you at all, black family. They don't, okay? They don't respect you whatsoever. So when I point it out to you with the most damning evidence, they have no choice but to call me a racist. Me, okay? So you see, all their manners and their prudence and their choosing words carefully, that's for the league of dawah dope dealers. That's for the rabid ruwaybada and the representatives of the new wave hypocrisy dawah and their followers. But to the black people, and especially black independent thinkers, they are uniquely vicious. They are distinctively hostile when it comes to black people, and there are just way too many examples of that. There's too much to count. Excuse me. And most recently, this little bald-headed treasure troll who accused Abu Talba of not being able to articulate himself due to his African American slang. Like when they called Shadid Muhammad a black nationalist as a type of slur or an affront, or the way they dealt with the doctor and Sheikh Tahir Wyatt when he addressed the Nation of Islam on their platform. So you see how they can accuse us of all sorts of racism when we address the Nation of Islam. But when it comes to somebody who is openly pandering to white supremacy, Ya Rab, they don't have a single word to say about that individual because they do not respect black Dawah, nor do they respect black issues. You see how their vitriol came out. You see how their hatred came out for calling our people to Islam. But they don't have any problems debating Christians, debating atheists in the construct of civil discourse. Only when it comes to black people. So they can accept white supremacy and pander to it, even though there has never been a more destructive system of rule other than white supremacy in human history. All of your countries, all every last one of you, all of you who are fleeing your countries and come here to the West, you're fleeing your countries directly as a result of white supremacy. Not some of you, all of you, okay? But as long as you're given the opportunity to get educated and participate in that system and bolster it and benefit from it, it's easy for you to ignore the plight of black people, turn a blind eye, and can't hear you. But also the plight of your own people in your very own countries because of white supremacy. So when I come and I say we need to withdraw from that society, especially as black people, because we've been suffering under it. Black people directly have been suffering under white supremacy. You have the nerve to call me a racist. When I call you out for ignoring the suffering for as long as I've been Muslim of the plight of black people, you have the nerve to call me a racist. And the one who is openly making apologetic articles, you give him every platform because he's fighting the LGBTQ, not knowing that they are both, the left-right paradigm are both two opposite ends of the same system of white supremacy. And if you fight white supremacy, you fight both systems. But you don't want to hear that. Because like Sheikh Abu Toba said, you want to hear nothing from these niggas. So this new wave of hypocrisy is mass producing people who don't keep up. Not that they can't keep up, they just don't. They are people who are intellectually lazy. Ain't nobody picking on you because we don't like you. We're picking on you because you're wrong. You're wrong. You're on the same talking points that we were on 15, 20 years ago. Your Dawah is old and tired, and it's not helping the people. And because we understand the nuances of the Dawah in present time, you're mad because you're wrong. You're mad because you're wrong. And some of you think that when you say stuff, you think you're right, but you're not. And some of you get mad because you're intellectually lazy. And it's not that you're naturally stupid. It's just that you're choosing not to do the homework. You also choose not to listen to your elders at the same time, thinking you know everything. So because you saw a noble da'i say it on a video, you just spread it everywhere. When we tell you, just remain silent. Just don't say anything, because we have the experience. We've already witnessed this. We know how these plants and moles leverage Islamic principles against the Muslims. And the next thing you know, we've gone from a problematic issue to major discord. You think that we're remaining silent in order to brush things under the rug. And as I told you before, I didn't say anything because this is fitna. That's why. Not to brush it under the rug, not to hide it, not to protect people. And you do this not realizing that we've seen these situations before, and we're trying to figure out the best way to handle these issues. Well, not we, but the scholars, whatever, the elders, right? You see, you would rather be first than be right, and that's the problem. You have to look at the bigger picture. So now that you've done all this, with Daniel Haqiqatjou, putting him forward, who is an alt-right political apologist, right? What are you going to say now? What are you going to say? He's on the same spectrum as Youre Mad. There's no difference. You put him forward because you were impatient, because you put yourselves in that position. You think these are the only articles he wrote? And you should see what he said about his teachers. But that's another thing. Because again, I'm not here to refute Daniel Haqiqatjou. I'm here to show you guys something about yourselves. How hasty you are. When you should be quiet, you're talking. Now that you've seen with your own eyes what's really going on, what are you going to do? You can't keep harping against progressive left-wing politics and the message of Youre Mad without not criticizing the alt-right doctrine of Daniel Haqiqatjou, and at the same time still expect to keep your integrity intact. It's impossible. And this is why I focus on white supremacy, because if you attack white supremacy, you take both of them out. Liberalism and ultra-conservatism in one fell swoop. They're just tools set up by white supremacy with one solitary goal, and that is to keep the benefactors of this system enriched and empowered. And your first mistake was assuming that these people were well-intentioned when they are the spawn of Satan. How can you as a Muslim possibly justify the integration of Muslims into any Western social construct, knowing full and well that all of it is white supremacy? Democracy, capitalism, liberalism, socialism, communism, fascism, and on and on and on. It's all constructs set up by white supremacists in order to keep the people divided so that they can remain in power. This is a great treachery. Wallahi, it's a great treachery. Not a single Muslim country was left untouched by these divide and conquer tactics, so much so that the effects of these constructs are glaringly obvious till this very day. Glaringly obvious. So I will leave you with that. Inshallah, in the next video, we will get more into detail. And I'll leave the links so you can see for yourself. And I came to you in peace, and I leave you in peace and love and serenity. No hatred in my heart. Subhanakallah bihamdik wa ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Please like, subscribe, share. Please hit me up on Patreon. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and the blessings of Allah be upon all of you.
It's you liberals who have lifted them up, Howard.
Paul, you conservatives make a mistake. You can't afford to strangle hope in people. Without hope, people become dangerous.
No, Howard, you liberals have let them invade our society. You give them jobs, political jobs.
Paul, you missed the point. It's only the smart ones we move up.
That makes it even worse.
No, we have to move them up. If we leave a smart one in the ghetto, he might develop into a leader against us. But if we raise him up into white society, we neutralize him. He feels compelled to try to act like us. He loses his identity and his racial anger, if he has any. He becomes alien to his brothers. They realize he sold them out, and they grow to hate him. He becomes worthless to them and safe for us. No, thank you. In fact, in his love for the creature comforts, except for his color, he's become one of us.